Why hello there, and welcome to the exciting first episode of Tabletop Ferox. It is the same series, I just decided that some weirdo on the internet reviews obscure role-playing games was too long, too specific, and honestly never as funny as I thought it was back when I came up with it in 2018. And in this episode, I will be looking at GURPS Furries, a product that caught my attention when I was doing research for the GURPS videos. And the big thing that caught my attention is, while there are lots of games and supplements that deal with anthropomorphic animals, very few of them actually use the F word. Obviously that is in some part due to the fact that hating furries is a popular meme amongst edgy 12-year-olds and adults with the mentality thereof. And honestly, just because reasons, I kind of assume there are more of them in the target audience for GURPS than there are people with a positive opinion of furries. But let's get into GURPS Furries, a 39-page PDF released in 2021 by Steve Jackson Games, and is one of those smaller digital exclusive products that I said I liked the idea of in the other video, and that I was going to review, and now I am. The book starts out with a discussion about what furries are, at least in the author's mind, as well as getting into the cultural and historical influences on anthropomorphic media. And similar to the noteworthiness of having furries in the title, it does also mention the furry fandom, which, for the reasons specified earlier, is a little odd. Also, this might be the only RPG supplement I've ever looked at that has a sidebar on catgirls. There's also a little section on putting anthropomorphic animals into a campaign with 12 different little campaign types, ranging from having anthropomorphic animals being unique engineered creatures by humans, to living alongside humans, to being the dominant or exclusive sapient life form in the setting. The second chapter focuses on rules for anthro characters, mainly little modifications to existing advantages to make them more useful or appropriate for anthropomorphic animals. This chapter also covers combat techniques and fighting styles based more around animal anatomy, although that particular section left me feeling a little bit in the dark for having not read GURPS Martial Arts. Then chapter 3 provides all of the animal people. I'm just going to be generous here and say 48 different templates in 5 categories. And that is what's in this book. But what do I think about it? As I said earlier, the concept of integrating anthropomorphic animals into a role-playing game is nothing new. I've covered at least half a dozen games that deal with that specific topic. And the choice to use the term furry is perhaps not as intentional as you might think. The overview of the whole concept and history of anthro characters is a very surface-level survey of the topic. It feels like an assignment given to someone who didn't know what furries were by someone who didn't know what furries were. It has a distinctive feeling of a writer who got all their information from one source, filled in all the blanks with assumptions, and then presented it as fact. For example, when discussing terminology in the What is a Furry section, it is stated that anthropomorphics explicitly focused on a human body plan. It also suggested a science fiction approach. And then on the other side, funny animals evoked cartoon characters. It sometimes suggested a humorous or over-the-top approach without serious plot or settings. And honestly, I don't think I've ever heard anyone else make that specific distinction, or use anthropomorphic as a noun. And I'm pretty sure that the author just saw Albedo Anthropomorphics, a serious science fiction comic with humanoid animal characters, and said, ah yes, that's what anthropomorphic means. Which is kind of an obvious supposition for me to make because they do mention it in the same paragraph. The whole thing also reads somewhat like a textbook, which, isn't uncommon for role-playing games from the 80s. For example, the word furry, which this book will mainly use, has wider and narrower senses. Narrowly defined, furries are animals with humanoid body plans, sapient minds, and motives and cultures comparable to those of humans. Humanoid is a subset of tetrapod, referring to land vertebrates, and furries are characteristically based on animals with 4 limbs which can easily be anthropomorphized. Humans are also land animals, and most furries are based on land or amphibious creatures. Yeah, just rolls off the tongue, doesn't it? And here's the thing, I had a similar criticism of the GURPS 4th edition basic set, that the writing felt very dated. But that is the revised version of a book from the 1980s. This is a new book from 2021, and it still feels like it was written at least 20 years ago. As for the content, it is mostly fine. I have some issues that I will get to in a bit, but overall it is some nice rules adjustments for helping to incorporate funny animals into your GURPS experience. And then of course lots of templates, which is great for people who don't want to have to build their funny animals from scratch. Or rather, one section of the templates is great. The diversity of creatures section provides the majority of the templates and are more or less normal anthropomorphic animal templates. But I guess that wasn't GURPSy enough because there are also 4 additional sections where the choices get a little weird, such as a chimpanzee that has been taught sign language, the intelligent horses from Gulliver's Travels, a tiger centaur, not like the sort of tiger centaur you're thinking of if you are familiar with furries, just a centaur, but tiger. An oracular lamia, which is specifically stated as being just a snake with a head of a woman, and a frog prince, which is a frog, not an anthropomorphic frog, just a regular frog with human intelligence and an ability that they turn back into a human if kissed by a person of the same or higher social status. Which hopefully you are realizing is completely pointless, and is kind of making me wonder if GURPS players are aware of the fact that the Game Master can just say that the frog turns into a prince, or vice versa, without having to have rules for that specified in the book. Just overall a bunch of things that makes it seem like the author didn't really understand the assignment. Because the things I'm complaining about are thematically all over the damn place. There is a Greek monster, characters from an 18th century novel, 2 templates from a different GURPS book, just all of this weird stuff that only vaguely associates with the main theme. Also, as I said, this weird distinction between anthropomorphic furries and funny animals, the latter of which they have 4 templates for, the main difference being that they are closer in size to the regular animals, and also all have a 3-dimensional drawing trait, which would only be relevant in a Who Framed Roger Rabbit type setting where these cartoon animals were interacting with humans or just something other than cartoon animals. And I am not a GURPS person, obviously, but it seems like providing all of these random, unrelated, hyper-specific things is counter to what GURPS is supposed to be, more of a base that provides you with something that you can customize. Like, the book doesn't really need to provide an anthropomorphic mole with superpowers. They can just provide an anthropomorphic mole, and if someone wants to give it superpowers, they can. And for my final complaint, most of the templates have elusive names based on literature, mythology, taxonomy, or other sources. Although fortunately there's also a table that tells you what those things mean. And here's the thing, if you need to provide an entire table just so that people can understand the very, very fancy names that you came up with, those are actually bad names, and you should come up with better ones that people can understand. You see, in a role-playing game, you generally want to name things so that people know what they are. That's why the spell Fireball is called Fireball, because it makes a ball of fire. And this makes the book very difficult to rate, because the stuff that's good is good, but the stuff that's bad feels like it was just thrown in to take up pages and hope that nobody would even notice it was there. Honestly, it really makes me wish I could give them like a half minus. And because this is my show, I can. And the layout is okay for 20 years ago, but by today's standards, extremely dated. And that is it for GURPS Furries, an okay book that made some questionable decisions. As was my main line of criticism, it just feels like they could not stick with what the book promises. Like, I picked up GURPS Furries for one thing: animal people. I did not want GURPS Animal Experiments, or GURPS Fairy Tales, or GURPS as many literary references as you can possibly shove into one book. And yes, I could just ignore the content I don't like, but the thing is, there's a non-anthropomorphic horse and no anthropomorphic horse, a non-anthropomorphic frog and no anthropomorphic frog, funny animal versions of a duck, mouse, and turtle, but no anthropomorphic versions, which means that this book does not even provide a necessary template to make a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle. And then just in general, there's no common animals like deer, cows, possums, crows, there's not a lot of stuff that it feels like there should be. It's like they did the extra credit without actually finishing the assignment. However, despite that whole ramble, if you are wanting to incorporate some animal people into your GURPS game and don't want to do all the work to put them there yourself, this does that thing. Like, it's not going to give you every option you want, and there's definitely some stuff you're not going to need, but it does the thing it's supposed to do. And thank you for watching, with extra special thanks to my Fightin' Flail Snails, Samuel Gorski and Randy Mulholland. If you'd like to be cool like them, check out my Patreon, where you can get early access to videos and fun stuff that I make for the Patreon. Also, I've got a Ko-fi. You can give me money on that if you want, but if you don't want, that's cool too. You can still hit all the lovely buttons, like, subscribe, these other videos that either myself or the cold, heartless YouTube algorithm have lovingly selected for you, which I am sure are lovely videos that you will also enjoy. And I will see you next time.